3 Asian American perspectives on Harvey, an evacuee, a Katrina victim, and a Trump-loving Republican. Next on Emil Amok's Takeout. And hello, dear listener, whoever you are. Welcome to what I call Emil Amok's Takeout. We serve it, you take it out. Forms the acronym EAT, EAT. And it is time to eat. My takes on all things about race, society, politics, and diversity, and everything those things touch in our culture and society with respect to Asian Americans. And you don't have to be Asian American to lend us your ears. It's your minds we want. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host. And you might ask, why Amok, Emil? Well, the short story is for nearly 15 years, my Emil Amok column was a staple of Asian Week, what was once the leading Asian American weekly in English in America. Amok was the name of my compilation of essays, and Amok is on my driver's license, not indicative of my mental state. And it's the name of my solo show, my one-man theatrical experience coming for Filipino American History Month just in time. In October, stay tuned for an announcement. And in November, we're going to the Charm City Fringe Festival in Baltimore. Once again, we'll be releasing details right here and on my website at amok.com. And now the column, Emil Amok, is home based on the website of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog. That's at ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Check it out. And if you like what you see, you like what you hear here, well, ALDEF is a 501c3. Go to the donate button. It's tax deductible. Really, it's totally tax deductible, and that's a good way to get a tax cut, not like this draconian Trump way. On this episode, as I release this podcast on National Day of Prayer, the National Day of Prayer, which coincides with a Christian Day of Prayer, which is, of course, Sunday. So you see how hard that was for Donald Trump to declare. I mean, he did get a mulligan on empathy as he went back to the flood-ravaged areas of Texas and Louisiana this weekend. And I guess he understands now what it means to be consoler-in-chief because the tweeting president took a few selfies. I mean, he took to the whole thing of empathy like a fish to water, as you might say. I mean, he knew exactly what to do. Just a few selfies, but is that enough? The long ordeal of Harvey is not over and merely kicks into a kind of semi-dry period. Semi-dry because while some people are going back home to go through the storm's debris, there are others who aren't back yet. The water's just too high. And on this episode, we'll talk to one evacuee and her experience. Jessica Kong, her family is still waiting to return to their home. We'll also talk to a Katrina victim, Stephen Wu, who moved to Houston after that storm, that first storm in his life, and now finds himself compelled to help others as he's now living in Houston and trying to help as many Harvey victims as he can. And then there's Martha Wong, a 78-year-old Texas politician. She's the first Asian American city council person of Houston and a Republican who, well, not coincidentally, defends Donald Trump and the way he's handled himself during Harvey. First, let's hear from Jessica Kong. You know, while some residents are returning and picking through the debris of their material lives on Saturday, that didn't include Jessica and her mother and her brother. The home where they live in Katy, where the reservoir releases made Harvey's impact even more formidable, was still underwater. The Kongs are just one of an estimated 100,000 families whose homes in Houston were damaged by Harvey. Throughout the state, that number is about 200,000 homes. But since Monday, August 28th, the family voluntarily evacuated when the water was just about thigh high, and they don't know when they're going to be able to get back. On the website, we include a picture of where their home was on Thursday. They told me the water's still high, they don't have flood insurance, and frankly, they don't know if it's going to be this weekend or maybe in a few more days. Her family's already applied for FEMA relief online. Reports say more than 450,000 have already registered. They've contacted their homeowner's insurance company, and after staying in a shelter in a local middle school, they've since relocated to an older sister's home. She's a little further out in the suburb of Houston, which did not suffer from Harvey's rains. And now they're contemplating what's going to happen, as they are expected back to work on Tuesday, and they hope maybe to be back in their home by then. Here's Jessica Kong.
We were able, we were healthy enough to walk on our own, and so we figured if we were to move closer to the front of our neighborhood, because our house is more centralized in our neighborhood, so we could, access the boat. So like I said, it was about thigh high, so it wasn't bad at that point. We were able to wade safely. So we got about a third of the way through our neighborhood. We actually convinced our neighbors next door to go with us because she was staying along with a teenage daughter, and all five of us walked, and we were able to catch a boat out of the neighborhood. And out of our neighborhood is that junior high, so it was a school that they dropped us off at. The water at that time, there were parts where it was still low enough to where powerboats could go through. So you just had to wade through it. So it was about calf high. It wasn't safe for the powerboats to necessarily drive through those, but they could bring lifeboats and stuff. So we had to walk about not more than like half a mile to the next intersection, and that's where they had pickups and high-rise vehicles to take us to the shuttles, which at that point was Seago Ranch Junior High.
Yeah.
The high school, Seago Ranch High School, was already full at that point, but by then they were filling up the junior high next door. So we got taken there about Monday, that evening, stayed for a few hours, and then we were able to catch a ride from one of my brother's friends to my sister's house.
Yeah. Was it kind of exciting in a strange way, or was it sad, or how were you feeling at the time?
It's definitely disheartening to see how many people were affected, but it was hopeful in seeing how much the community came through. It was, just out there helping. Especially a lot of people who, they weren't affected, or they just knew that their friends needed help. And so, like the person that picked us up, his boat, he actually said that he was in Houston the day before, picking up his friend's boat where they lived. And he lives in Southern Meadows, so his place was fine. So when he saw, the level of damage, that's when he came, to the Katy area. He came back, to help around his neighborhood.
Has it surprised you how people were so generous and how people came together? I mean, that's sort of been the theme when you want to talk about the positive thing about this natural disaster. People have talked about that humanity that comes through. Were you astounded by it? And did it ever, was it a surprise?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's nothing better than to hear, they do say that they're turning away volunteers because they have too many,
Yeah.
That's always a great thing to hear. And like when we went to the shelter, they had so much stuff already set up, and they had just opened the junior high, not that long ago. It was still, there were still a lot of people there that were taking shelter. They put the families with pets in the cafeteria, and the families without pets, in the gym.
Yeah.
And, it's still pretty full, but the amount of, donations that they already had lined up was really, surprising in such a short amount of time,
Yeah. So what are as we wrap up, and as I hope that you get to your place sooner than later, what do you think is going to be your lasting, what do you think is going to be the lasting memories of Harvey for you? What are you never going to forget? And what kind of, if you were to put this in the lessons learned category, what do you think you'll always remember about this experience?
Hopefully that it reinforces, the Good Samaritan in everybody, and that people won't forget how affected everybody was because of this event. So even after we get to a recovery place where, we're back to quote-unquote normal again, that we can sustain this, connection with our community and, not lose that. I think that would be best. Especially in the administration that we have right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully it really keeps, hopefully the spirit stays within our community, but also it has affected those around the nation to say that, yes, this is Texas, but hopefully people can see the differences in others and just, put that aside and just focus on humanity.
Yeah. Well, Trump is coming to, as we speak, Trump is going to be going to Texas and Louisiana tomorrow. What do you think he should do? What do you think he needs to do in order to keep up that spirit that you refer to?
Well, he needs to do a lot of things, but what he really needs to focus on is just anything besides himself. If he can focus on even just the first responders, focus on, law enforcement and how well they're doing and how efficient they've been in the rescue effort, how well the community has, assisted in a short amount of time, even when, the government hasn't been able to, not saying that they haven't reached out, but just knowing that time is of the essence and that, they'll praise the local community for stepping up because, they just saw their fellow man in need. So, if he can focus on the humanity aspect and not break any of his trivial, other focuses that he feels like his administration needs to address at this time, like immigration and, the wall and any of that sort of nonsense, then, I'll be satisfied. And he can just focus on the efforts that have been made to rebuild and recover. That would be ideal.
Well, he's set up this weekend as a time where he has told people he will make his decision on DACA, the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, and that he would maybe hold that decision off until maybe Tuesday. Do you think that him coming to Houston, and if he puts on a big show of big-hearted humanity, and then he comes back to get rid or eliminate DACA, do you think, he'd be able to, not, be able to ward off the criticism of being called a hypocrite?
The thing is, he's disappointed, at least in my opinion, he's disappointed me in so many ways already. I was not for him, but I was hoping on the behalf of people that were in support of him, that he would step up. Even in very simple circumstances where he just literally had to not talk, he has not been able to keep his opinions to himself. And so I feel like if he is in support of the passing of this, then it's going to happen one way or the other. Nobody else in the government has tried to step up against him that's on his side. So I feel like anything that he says is not going to be true. I feel like he will be a hypocrite because he doesn't even have the bones or the stamina to fake it. So I just, it's hard because I want to be hopeful about the government, but he has not given us much to go on. So it's up to the lower levels to step up and put us at ease. So, I hope for the best, but, I expect the worst from him at this point.
Jessica Kong, a Harvey evacuee, still waiting to return to her home in Katy, Texas, just outside of Houston. Also on the podcast is Katrina survivor Stephen Wu, who's just 25. He talks about how the experience helped him to both cope and assist his neighbors in his new hometown of Houston. He says he really grew up a lot when Katrina hit, when he was just 13. And now he feels compelled to help out. He talked about the power of the group hug as he witnessed the love shared by volunteers who comforted Harvey victims in the shelters. He's working as a volunteer for the Organization of Chinese Americans and talks about how there were 17 shelters set up in churches and community centers in the west part of the county, specifically to help out Asian Americans who needed language assistance. He says such detail is not an insignificant thing to make sure that people get through this Harvey experience without the psychological and emotional trauma that he saw that occurred with people because of Katrina. Here's Stephen Wu talking about how Katrina has helped him learn how to deal with the after effects of Harvey.
So basically, 12 years ago, after Katrina, my family and I evacuated here to Houston. We stayed here for about 4 months, and then we went back to New Orleans in our FEMA trailer. Mm-hmm. I eventually went to Atlanta for school, but then I found work here back in Houston, so it's kind of full circle in a way.
Yeah. So what was it like? From last week to today, You went through Katrina in '05. You had the Katrina anniversary has just happened, and now this happens. How do you feel about all this?
It's a lot of deja vu, for sure. Obviously, the flooding issues that's been going on is words really can't describe how immense the damages are. Just seeing homes, businesses, cars, roads, highway, parks just completely underwater. It's incredible, and I think what I try to focus more on is the human element during all of this disaster. How we come together during moments, like this, disastrous moments, painful moments, where it doesn't matter, who you are, what your religion is, what skin color you are, what your beliefs are. It's just we're trying to help another human being, get through this process. Whether it's rescuing them, whether it's volunteering at shelters, or or donating to shelters, or donating on funds, or just giving moral support. Something as small as going up to a person and just giving them a hug and asking how they're coping with the situation, if they need anything at all. Just seeing all of this large wave of, volunteerism that's happening right now is amazing. And I saw the same thing in New Orleans as I do here in Houston, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the other similarity that I see from those two.
Describe a situation or an instance that has been noteworthy in your mind that you've seen that demonstrates that kind of unity or that kind of feeling that comes out of these kind of natural disasters. What is an example of something that you would see that maybe before Harvey or without Harvey, people would just walk on by and be invisible to each other, and yet because of Harvey, they've come together. What has struck you? What have you seen?
I think when I was helping out with a few others at George R. Brown Convention Center, which is hosting, I believe, close to 8,000 to 9,000 individuals that have been affected. I was helping push or help an elderly lady with her 3 cats. They were rescued on boat recently, and she had trouble walking because of just her own medical issues. So we had to find her a wheelchair to get her to the families and pets section of the convention center to be situated in their cots. But obviously she was going through a lot. She didn't know where her family was. Her phone was dead, and she needed to find an outlet to charge her phone to call her family. And it was all obviously a very traumatic situation. But once we got to the table to register, there was a moment where she did break down a bit, But I think everyone, including the people behind us, the people registering people, we all kind of just paused and had a moment where we just all got together to give her a hug and tell her that everything will be fine, that we will get her the supplies that she needs, and that we will find her family. I don't see that a lot, where just a large group of people come together to one person who's really suffering. That's something that I think happens quite often. I'm just giving one example, but I think it's happened quite often here in Houston recently.
And she was...
We eventually...
all right, finish off. She eventually what?
She eventually did find her family. We stayed with her for a prolonged amount of time to make sure that her phone was charged, and then we called her family, and she was reunited. They were actually at the George R. Brown Convention Center too, but they were evacuated at a different time than she was. Rescued. So we got her in contact and in touch with her family members. So it was really nice to see that.
And she was white, black, African American, Asian. What was her background?
She was African American.
And she was how old?
I would probably say 50 plus.
Yeah, and everyone else, no matter what their background. I mean, I wouldn't. She doesn't sound as if she was a wealthy person, maybe middle class, or how would you?
I would presume middle to lower.
Yeah,
Correct.
and yet is as I was saying that prior to Harvey, would you see much interaction between the people who did come to her aid and herself? Would you have seen that without this kind of natural disaster?
Um, in Houston, I think you may be able to see that in pockets of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on average, probably not, or less likely. I can't definitively say yes or no.
Yeah.
Because I have seen what that does occur, but then again, I'm usually at places where the people are very generous and kind in nonprofits and situations. But I guess a typical day in the streets, maybe not. Especially if they're not from a more affluent background. If they are a little less wealthy and they don't seem to be dressed the same way as you or acting the same way than you, maybe not, even if they are in a dire situation. But it was good, at least in this situation, to see how there was people of all different backgrounds coming to her. Like, we had legitimately 5, 6, 7 folks just surrounding her to give support somehow, some way. Caucasians, Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinx, everyone. It doesn't matter. We were all there just to make sure that she felt like there was support in some fashion. So I probably didn't. You probably won't see that a lot normally without this kind of situation.
And this is kind of the magic of this sort of natural disaster of this magnitude. You will see a corresponding sense of love and humanity, I guess, for lack of. I mean, that's what it is. We're seeing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I've noticed, and I was trying to do this to myself, is just giving hugs, right? Mm-hmm. To random strangers who are just sitting by themselves, waiting in line to either go to the medic station or waiting to be registered, right? Just giving out a hug and just being there. I mean, that you definitely do not see on a normal Thursday afternoon or something. That's something that only happens when something really disastrous occurs.
Yeah. Now, why is it, Stephen, that you've been able to move around and get around and some others haven't? I mean, I used to live in Houston. I know what the rains could be like, although nothing of this magnitude. When I lived in Houston, even some heavy rains could cause flooding if one was stupid enough to drive into the standing water, and as I was during my flood experience, but that was just a heavy rain. This is a torrential, mega torrential rain, and that's Harvey's 100, 800 year type of rain.
Correct.
So I haven't, I can't begin to understand how bad, but I have an inkling of that. But how is it that people like you and other volunteers have been able to get around? Because it seems like I know that when you might think that the roads are passable, but then you come to an off ramp or an on ramp, and then you're stuck. How is it that you've been able to survive and help?
So I'm pretty fortunate where I normally live in Bel City, which got hammered.
That's near Chinatown, right?
Bel City, which is a little more east of Chinatown, it's within the loop. Mm-hmm. But it's right north of Meyerland, which is very low-lying, as you know, and next to the bayou.
Right.
My apartment is right north of that, but I was still very cautious because of what I've dealt with in the past. So I kind of mini relocated to another person's home in Montrose.
Right. Oh,
which
that's right.
is a little higher.
That's where I lived. I lived off of Westheimer. So Montrose was safe, huh?
Yes, a good amount of Montrose was actually okay this time around. Very surprising, right? Some areas were flooded, but the place where I stayed in Montrose was perfectly fine. We didn't lose power. We had minimal street flooding, and after Sunday morning, we said, okay, the rain is getting a little better. And we were seeing that people are being, rescued and sent to George R. Brown in downtown Houston. Let's check, maps and, Waze and social media to see if the roads in between where we were in Montrose and downtown were clear. And so we found a route that basically got from us to West Gray Street all the way down to downtown, and it was very clear. Few branches on the road, but no flooding, surprisingly.
Well, and now you probably couldn't have done this. Like when I lived in Houston, we had to rely on those maps, the paper maps with the little, the zone areas, and you got to go to the main index to find the smaller page that was more detailed. I'm sure GPS helped you immensely, huh? Absolutely.
GPS was fantastic. Social media was a very, very useful tool. I personally have never seen such great coordination through social media. Whether it's first responders or even just people, telling people, hey, this area, there's rising waters, evacuate. And they receive that news much faster than the news outlets because they're on their phones or computers already.
Yeah.
So that helped us get to the shelter. And we were fortunate because other people, they wanted to help, they were fine, but they were stuck, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I notice about this time around, that versus, say, decades ago when I was in Houston, that the information was there so people could get to where they needed to be. But in the absence of that, people were told to shelter in place, and because if they didn't have the tools, they would be just stuck, right?
That's correct. They would believe the notices and alerts and just stay home.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And all of us outside of Houston, we're looking at the one picture or the two pictures that they show, and we just think the entire city was inundated, and it sort of was, but there were still ways that you could get out and maneuver like you did. So.
Agreed. The national coverage, I don't know how it was since we were only watching local news, but I heard it was very dramatic, which it is, but they didn't focus a lot on just, some of the minor details that could be important, like you just mentioned, hey, there are these routes that are available that you may be able to use to go to the shelters. And once the weather got better, they were definitely using local news to get people hey, if you are, number one, safe and dry and have a way to get to these shelters, please do come to volunteer. And that's when all the large waves of people started coming in.
And so now, what do you think, while things are happening, the president came the other day, were people aware of that? Did they care? Did they have a sense of that from what you could see?
Yes, people knew about the president coming into Texas. I believe he stopped at Corpus Christi and then Austin, but he did not stop in Houston, from what I remembered. Did people really care about that?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Yes, it's good to see the president come into town, but also not a lot of, I guess, people from Houston were really focused on that. It's more like, okay, what are you doing to help besides, declaring, this as a disaster zone for FEMA to come in? But we weren't too sure of what he would do to help, except giving moral boost, which I'm not even sure he did that after what I read in Corpus Christi. It sounded more like a rally. in a lot of people's perspective.
Yeah. Tell me about when you deal with people. You deal with anyone who needs help, of course, but tell me about the Asian Americans, because there's a sense that while Harvey doesn't discriminate, usually the people who are most affected, and you saw this with Katrina, the people who are most affected are people who have less than others, and people who live in the areas where the housing is not as good or is not as protected from these things, from the flooding. Do you think that's the experience here? Is that what we're going to see once we can get a perspective of it? Or do you see a lot of people who, the people in the shelters mostly people in need, and then not people from River Oaks, for example, which is the expensive or one of the more traditional expensive places in Houston?
Correct. I believe so. Now, I would say this. So Sugarlands, which is a little more, affluent, they got hit pretty hard too, and there was some flooding there.
Yeah.
And Katy got hit hard too, and it's a little more affluent over there. So the suburbs got flooding, and there had to be water rescues.
Yeah.
Now, they would naturally be transported to shelters as well. However, I will say, if they do have, additional more money, they most likely would have left the shelters immediately. I helped one family actually get checked in, and then they immediately got picked up by friends. So they had connections to not stay at the shelter.
Yeah.
I think in some of the shelters, but the vast majority are people who do not have those resources, so they have to stay at those shelters. Mm-hmm. And it is going to be mostly marginalized communities with lower income families. From the Asian American perspective, the one thing that we're keeping track of, or trying to assist and keep track of, is language assistance. Mm-hmm. We're making sure, or trying to make sure, that shelters have translators on site. NRG, where we helped out 2 days ago, they were very cognizant of that. So they asked for people who spoke, not just English and Spanish, but also all other major, dialects and languages. So all the major Asian languages were essentially covered. Mandarin, Vietnamese, Korean, Tagalog, Urdu, Hindi. They were there.
Really?
And that was really great to see. NRG, which was led by Baker Ripley, formerly Neighborhood Centers, they were very cognizant of that, so we were very happy to see that.
And the energy center was what, about how many thousand were there?
So the night that we started was the day they opened. Mm-hmm. And I believe 2,500 people were shuttled within that first day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that number has risen or not, but there's definitely over probably 2,000 over there right now.
Wow. And a lot of these services, the language services, have been helpful?
Yes, for a few families, I believe so. Mm-hmm. Some of them were able to speak English, which is great. Some of them not so much. So I think it's extremely valuable.
How are these, people who are the language minorities? How do they get assistance if no one speaks their language?
I personally don't know. I haven't seen those cases yet. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure it's happened. We're not aware of what's happening in those circumstances. So I don't have an answer for that one, unfortunately.
To talk about Chinatown, I know it got hit, and for a while they closed down the center down there. I heard the mayor mention the
CCC, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how has the area been impacted, and how are Asian Americans doing there?
Surprisingly, a lot of the stores were actually open during the storm, mm-hmm. Which we found kind of funny because It sounds like what we would do. We keep our stores open during anything.
Yeah.
So there was flooding on Bel Air Avenue or Boulevard. I don't believe it flooded a lot of the businesses. Some of the homes may have sustained a little bit of damage, but for the most part, it's fine. It's back and running now. We did visit a good amount of shelters in the area. Mm-hmm. So there's probably, I want to say 10. Let me check the list, actually. I want to be accurate here. So we're also working on this resource guide for Houston shelters that are in API communities. And so far we identified, that's a lot, 17 shelters in the area that serve majority Asian American youth. And we haven't seen a lot of Asian Americans in those shelters right now. They're mostly at downtown locations because of the initial rush. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to let local officials know, like, hey, these shelters in the west part of Houston and in Sugar Land and Stafford, they're open, and they may be better suited to help Asian Americans with cultural, religious practices or norms, as well as give the language assistance that they may need. Even food, right? The food that George R. Brown and NRG they're receiving, they're very generic American foods. So I think the shelters in the west part of Houston, they'll have more food that these people will be familiar with from their own cultures or just, Asian food in general.
Really? I mean, they would prepare rice and...
Yeah, we went to we were at a Korean center, the Korean, the Full Gospel Korean Church of Houston, and they were serving Korean food. And there was an African-American family there. So it was pretty nice to see that.
So, and I gather that the Asian American families down at the George Brown Center, they're still doing okay, but is there an effort to shuttle them to these other shelters closer to their homes, or closer to where they would get help? The help that they,
We're trying. We were asking local officials on social media. We need to get in touch with them personally or through their, administration leads to get their attention, because they're not currently going to be shuttled. I haven't heard about that yet.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get that done.
Is it a significant thing? I mean, I know it would be much more comfortable. It would be comforting, if they were in that kind of situation. But so for me personally, I think it is a very important thing, right? Because I heard someone at NRG say, like, we're here to make them feel like our guests, right? We're not going to use the words evacuees or refugees or displaced. They're our guests. They're our friends. They're our neighbors. And we're going to treat them like that. So if that is the case, and there are people who have different, let's say, practices or religious beliefs, and they still need to pray, for instance, I don't believe NRG/George R. Brown are thinking about that currently, and I don't blame them, right? They have so many people to take care of. Mm-hmm. That being said, there are places in West Houston who are aware of this, and they probably will make space for this kind of environment. And for me, mental health during a disaster or significant trauma is extremely important, especially for kids, right? They're gonna. This is them growing up essentially really quickly at a young age in this environment, and it's important for them to still feel like they're accepted, they're welcomed, and that they're a part of this community, and that what they think and what they say is validated and not ignored as if it's not important. And we're hoping that these city officials hear that out and can do so. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be life or death if they stayed in downtown. I agree with that. But then again, I still care about the mental health and psychological impact that could occur if you do not,
acquiesce to their requests, basically.
Well, you know about this mental health issue. I mean, and it seems like you've come out of it in a positive way, but you experienced Katrina. You came here and talk about that mental health and that trauma that you had to deal with firsthand. And how is it that you have been able to come out of it so that you are now here in this second wave of natural disaster, right? Bigger than the first one, and here to volunteer.
So I was around 13 when Katrina happened, and we moved to Houston. We stayed at a family friend's place for about a week. There was a 1-week moratorium in New Orleans where you could not come back into the city, and we were waiting for that to be lifted so we can check the damages. So my dad planned to go by himself, and then I remember there was the night before he was going to leave, I something snapped in my head, and I said, I'm going to go too. Obviously, my mom wanted me to stay with me, with her and my little brother, who was 1 year old at that time. But I said, no, I believe the right thing to do is to go back and help my dad. And
he was going back to New Orleans.
He was going back to New Orleans to check what the damage is, just for himself. And I was like, no, I'm going to go and help. I think it's the right thing to do. It would be wrong of me to not go. I'm an able body. I am younger, so I probably have more energy than a lot of other people. I may not know what to do, but I can help in some capacity. So I think for me, that was one of the defining points where I matured greatly as a 13-year-old. So we did go back for a few days. We saw that our home was flooded. We had to gut out our home, throw out all the furniture, belongings, and personal items that were inundated. And we couldn't even get a hotel because all the hotels were booked, so we had to sleep in our cars for a few days. But so many would think of that as a negative. I actually kind of twisted into a positive where, like, you know what, this kind of experience not many 13-year-olds go through in America, especially. But it made me realize, like, what is reality, right? And what is needed and required in moments of disaster, like how to respond to something like that, to have, a clear mind and to be calm and not, overreacting to a situation. It was very firsthand experience that I got by doing so. So I think it's a positive from that experience more than a negative. It helped me really mature as an individual from there. Now, in Houston, when we came back and I had to go to school, a lot of the kids weren't the most mature at that time, so they were kind of picking at the New Orleans folks who came into their schools, like, oh, you're one of those people, your city deserved it, you guys are just leeching off of Houston, whatever. And a lot of us heard a lot of these things, and I can't necessarily blame them because they were so young. They were in middle school, and they were kids, basically. But it's still, and as a 13-year-old, it hurt quite a bit, saying, like, how could you say that to me when all I'm trying to do is survive at this point, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of internalized that personally, but the years following it, I tried to use that more as a motivation, really, to just to better myself, essentially, and to educate and make sure other people understand. Like, you may say these things in a joking fashion, but it has an impact on the people you're saying this to and their mental health. So please be aware of it, right? And be cognizant of what you say.
Well, you've really survived a lot and endured a lot from Katrina, but you're one person. I'm sure other people in your same situation, maybe close to your age, maybe did not handle it as well as you.
Possibly. I don't know. I will say, let's see. During Katrina, I just started junior high. Was there for about 3 days. I didn't really reconnect with a lot of the folks there, but I found more folks that survived Katrina in Houston. As you know, a lot stayed in Houston and did not go back to New Orleans. And for the most part, I think they had a somewhat similar experience, maybe not as extreme, but they do have a different outlook on life now, right? Where they don't know if the government is going to be there for them. FEMA was a train wreck for a lot of families during Katrina. They did not give enough services. The trailers that were sent to us was delayed a few months, which is a lot of time for people who are looking for shelter.
And you were in a FEMA trailer, right?
We were. We after staying in Houston for 4 months, we had to go back to the FEMA trailer, go to a FEMA trailer in front of our home. The problems that we had, the water was not consistent. The running water was not consistent. So my dad and I elected to just go shower somewhere else so that my brother and my mom could go shower in the FEMA trailer and not leave the premise to conserve the water. So we had issues with that. I know we had to eat MREs for a few times. The meals ready to eat, they're military food that you can just carry with you.
Yeah.
You don't need anything except some water, really, to cook the food. But yeah, my parents dealt quite a bit with that process. It was very hard for them, for sure, because they had to take care of me and my little brother at that time.
Right. And your parents were immigrants?
Yes, they're first generation.
From?
Correct. From China.
Yeah. What part?
Sorry?
What part?
What part? They're both from Central South China. My mom is from Wuhan, or the capital of Hubei. And then my dad's from Hunan, which is a province south of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're now in this situation where you have this background, and you know what it takes in some ways, huh? To build yourself back.
Yes, and it was funny. My parents actually called me during the storm, like, "Hey, you should have evacuated and come back to us here in Louisiana." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" The city that I am in, that I'm now calling home, is in pain. Like, I need to be here to help. And we're not, in my situation in Montrose, we were fine. So I'm like, I just like 12 years ago, I'm an able-bodied and I'm relatively young. I should be able to do something. And now I have some knowledge of what to do, from the recovery phase in the shelters to now the rebuilding phase that's going to come within the next few weeks. We're dealing with FEMA, trailers, and rebuilding homes and livelihoods, right? I kind of have an idea of what to do, and I want to help, because these are families that have suffered something that I went through as well, and I want to make sure that it's as easy of a process as it should be, because we went through this before as a region, as a country. We should not be making the same mistakes in Houston.
What are the big mistakes they got to avoid going forward? You've seen them. What would you tell the president?
Actually, well, I'm awaiting details from my family who knew more about the insurance side. But for the president, I would tell him, be here. Visit the cities. Don't just stop at Corpus, and I don't know why you went to Austin, but go to Rockport, go to Beaumont, go to LaPorte, go to East Houston, go to Sugar Land, go to Katy, go to Meyerland, go to the places where the damage really happened, and show that you actually care. When we saw President Bush fly over New Orleans and not land that was extremely discouraging. Like you didn't care enough to come to see why or how painful it was yourself. And as president of the United States, you need to have that in you. So I would really encourage him to see it firsthand. Once you do, and once you really see what's happened, you'll have a better understanding and maybe willingness to give more, whether it's funding, whether it's troops, whether it's whatever. I hope it motivates that person to do more. And I need him to see this firsthand first.
One of the things that is happening is that Texas, which is known for its conservatism, known for its big C conservatism, which means small government, we have the irony of people like Senator Ted Cruz, who came in on the Tea Party wave, crying, calling out for small government, and now here he is with this massive storm, this hurricane, now being forced to advocate for big government, or government to be as large-hearted and as big-hearted as possible. And
it's ironic.
Yeah, and instead of that, because we are pretty much, the cupboard is bare to begin with, we see the government, we see officials forced to ask for volunteerism, which, I don't know, is it unlimited? Is it going to continue? Is this what we're going to have to see more of in Houston in the coming months for everything to balance out? Because there may not be funds, there may not be a fully funded type of effort.
I honestly, I think so. My parents were part of the 2016 Baton Rouge floodings. It was pretty devastating.
Wow.
There was some, they were fine, but my friends over there were affected. And my mom told me that the funding for those families were a lot less than Katrina. So disaster relief funding has been cut quite a bit on a federal level. So I think the same thing may happen to Houston and Texas. I hope not. I hope they change and release more to help here. I don't know if they will. But if it does come down to that, then yes, more local volunteerism, donations, corporate donations, even celebrity and athlete donations from, I know J.J. Watt is having his $10 million campaign, which he just finished, I believe, and he may bump it up to now $15 million. We probably need more of that.
A lot more,
because,
I would say.
A lot more, because this is in the billions of dollars to help. Yeah. And that's why I need, and we in Houston and in Southeast Texas and parts of Louisiana need the president to see these places, to understand that this is not going to be done by ourselves. We only have so much in terms of resources. The federal government should be here to help. And it is, yes, ironic that Texas officials, which voted against, having more funding from federal resources to help with disasters when Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast corridor, it's ironic for them now saying we need more money here. And I hope they wake up, because it's sad to say, but you don't understand or try and empathize unless it happens to you. And that's a lot of people. And for Ted Cruz and others, it's now happening to them. So now they're waking up to this fact.
Well,
which is sad.
What's strange is that the images we get are, and strange that from the first world we're getting these kind of third world images of people trudging along and in these, wading in chest deep waters, and we're seeing these rescues, and people I know in Asia that I report to, they know what it's like, the typhoons and the monsoons, and they know what it's like, and it's a little humbling, I think, to see some of these images coming out of this big megapolis like Houston with its glass buildings and known for its capitalism?
It is. It's extremely humbling. I mean, you have a whole region, Houston being the fourth largest city in the United States, just crippled, immobilized, basically. Couldn't do anything for some time. And it really makes you think about, do we have everything in place to protect our people? The elderly, the sick, the poor. Like, is it all there for a first world country, a developed country? Sorry. Like, do we have? Are we doing enough to help them? I had a conversation with an elderly lady and her father, I believe, at NRG, and she was extremely, obviously angry at the situation. She was moved from Crosby, Texas, because of the chemical plant release that they had and leakages, down to NRG in Houston, and she was asking, like, why are they doing this? Should be at a hotel, and why are we not getting the resources that we should be getting? And it's in part because the federal government isn't doing enough currently, and it's being relied upon local citizens. NRG Center was ready to go by all volunteers and some government official assistance within, I think, 24 hours or less, maybe 12 hours. Hmm. They got a call to see if they could get it done at noon-ish, around that time. I don't remember. And then they were ready to mobilize and take in affected people by 11 p.m. Hmm. That's amazing, where they can go from, can you do this, to we're ready in that short amount of time. But it's all local efforts. There's no real substantial federal influence there. And so, and because of that, we don't have all the things that we need at 11 p.m., right? Yeah. So people keep asking, like, why don't you have this or that? Why don't you have more wheelchairs? Why don't you have more walkers? Are you doing, diabetic care here? And the answer may be yes or no, right? Because this is all local effort.
Yeah. So
it is very humbling to see that maybe we don't do enough on a federal level to help with these people.
Yeah. A lot of those images that people are seeing, some people have described as apocalyptic, and and then the mind races with all the things that they may have seen in pop culture about the apocalypse. And have you seen it that bad in Houston, or are things getting better, or are we now in a new phase where we're just dealing with the muck and trying to figure out, well, how do we just rebuild? Are we through with the apocalyptic images as the rain subsides and Houston tries to become more normal?
Well, the sun is out, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There are still parts of Houston which are underwater currently. Mm-hmm. There's still fear of the reservoirs, Barker and Attucks, that had to be released. They're not sure if that's going to be contained. I hope it will be. And it's good news that the rain has stopped, so the water levels should go down naturally. One difference, obviously, between Houston and New Orleans is that New Orleans is shaped like a bowl. So even if the rain stops, the water kind of just sits there. Mm-hmm. Houston, especially if your pumps don't work. But Houston, I think the water will naturally run off once the rain stops. So that's good to see that. It's a lot better now. Most of the city is up and running. Businesses are back. People are very hopeful. I could see it. Honestly, very willing to volunteer and help. I think we're ready to get to work, really, because a lot of places are turning away volunteers because there's just too many volunteers. Mm. So wow. I keep telling folks, like, conserve your energy. This is a marathon. This is not going to be a 1 week thing. This is going to be a year thing, 2 year thing, specifically with insurance claims and getting people back to their livelihoods who don't have the resources. So if you want to help, wait, conserve your energy, set a reminder in your calendar, maybe a month down the road, when rebuilding efforts like Habitat for Humanity will be coming into town to help with the home rebuilding process. Help translate for any FEMA claim issues that's going to be needed. We need your help there. It's great to help at shelters now, but I think they got it covered for the most part. Yeah. What you can do is donate while you can, and then come back later when we need you again.
And now, you know things will be back to normal if you find the traffic report saying that there are traffic jams, and it's not due to flooding, but it's due to people getting back into what they do, if they can do it. And that would be a welcome thing. But, Stephen, you've been through this, like I said, with Katrina before, and you've survived it, you've rebuilt. Is there any question that people... Because I can see how daunting it can be. You lost everything. Your house is a wreck. You got to get rid of everything in your house. Your belongings are damaged because of the water. I mean, and there's mold. There's you have to really rebuild. And I can imagine how people can just be so daunted by that, and maybe to the point of giving up. But you've seen that it can be done. You've done it. What do you tell them?
Don't give up. We are here in terms of resources and support. There are nonprofit organizations that serve different communities, whether it's Asian American or Latinx or African American or Muslim groups or LGBTQ groups or whatever the case may be, elderly like AARP. They're here. Don't think you are in this alone, because you're not. It's a lot of things to take care of, absolutely, like you said. From getting your home inspected, to get it adjusted, to get things thrown away, get a contractor, to figure out where you're going to stay in the meantime, how you're going to get any reimbursements for lost items. A lot of stuff. And then even if you have children, how are they going to go to school, if their schools are affected, other family members who may be as well affected, all of this is going to be racing through your head. And it's a lot of things. It's very daunting. It may be so bad that some people will, break down. And it's happened, and it will probably happen here in Houston, but I just want them to know that there are support groups, organizations out here that really want to help, that really need you to be positive and, just telling yourself to not give up. We're going to come out to you. We're going to come out to help you. Just please don't give up hope right now.
What did you say to yourself during the darkest times, after Katrina, that you will remind, or that will help remind you that there's a way out this time?
What did I tell myself? I think for me, it was a little different of an experience since I was a kid. I wasn't going through the insurance process myself. I told myself that people need me, my family needs me, that my little brother specifically, who was 1 year old at that point, needs me. And I would tell them, like, people need you to be strong at this point. Whether your children or your parents who are elderly, they're going to look to you. And you need to be strong in this moment. Your kids are going to ask you, is everything going to be okay? And you've got to tell them that it's going to be fine, because once you give them doubt, then it goes downhill from there. You've got to be that positive light in this dark sky right now, beacon of hope, if you will, to make sure that everyone's morale is up. You just got to be in that moment. I know it's hard because it doesn't look like, it may not look like that way to you, but to others, you are their crutch, and you need to be upright and ready and strong in these moments. And that's what I told them. Just, people will count on you. People will depend on you. And you are there to do that. So please be strong for those moments.
And because you survived Katrina.
Yeah. And it can be done.
All right. Stephen, thanks for sharing your thoughts and what you've seen. And,
yeah, absolutely.
It's, I feel for Houston because I lived there for 2 years back in the 70s, and I remember standing on top of the Shell building because I worked for a radio station, and I looked out. This is before there was an outer loop, and all the loops kept looping, and this is this is when it was a real struggle to get down to Friendswood or get down south toward all those cities near NASA down there. And and I guess my joke is, I remember Sugarland when there was sugar there, or I was in Houston when there was sugar in Sugarland. And now it's especially hard to imagine how, because Sugarland has developed into a relatively affluent community, and they were hit hard, as you said.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And ironically, we actually stayed in Sugarland when we evacuated from New Orleans. So to see that community now suffering, it's really heartbreaking to me and my family, because these are people who opened their homes to us, and I want to make sure that we're there for them this time.
Stephen Wu, who we thank him for giving up his time, some insightful notions about how to deal with Harvey, and very optimistic. He thinks Houston's going to be back. Very insightful in terms of how to deal with all of it. As it's going to be a long time, and as he puts it, it's going to be a marathon. So, gird up, dig in, and don't give up hope. Finally, we talked to Martha Wong. She's an Asian American political legend, the first Asian American woman elected to the Texas State House. She was also the first Asian American member of the Houston City Council, and a Republican. She wasn't a Trump supporter at first when I talked to her during the Texas primary last year in 2016, but she became a Trump supporter by the election. She said Trump may not be so great as far as empathy goes, but she was satisfied by his first visit to Houston last week, and she has no doubt that Houston will be back on its feet. She, of course, was untouched by Harvey. She was living in a high-rise next to Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church. We talked about that situation, among other things, including Houston politics, and how small government conservatives might be singing a different tune in post-Harvey politics. And we talk about why Houston floods so much. Here's my interview with Martha Wong. Harvey didn't affect you that much.
Not at all, because, other than, being prepared and trying to get things, but I live in a high-rise condominium. Mm-hmm. And I'm inside the loop. I'm across the street from Lakewood Church.
Oh, wow. So how bad did Lakewood Church have it, and did they have an excuse for not letting people in?
Well, I don't know that it flooded. I know that they have a garage that's, that you drive down into. Mm-hmm. And I know that they have rooms down in that basement area. So I would not be surprised if water got into those areas, because it kind of, you go down. Mm-hmm. And so it's below street level. Right. So water would naturally flow into that garage. And if they didn't have something to prevent it from going into the building, it could have gotten into the building.
But do you think it was just an excuse, or do you think he just delayed innocently, or do you think he should have opened up his doors right away?
Well, he said, according to what he said on the TV, is that, they had already talked to the mayor, and the mayor wanted them to be a collection agency. So that's what he said he was doing, and they had tons of stuff there. I went over and tried to volunteer yesterday.
Yeah.
We have a group of friends here in the condominiums, and all of us were safe, and we were all single women, and we decided, well, we'll go over there and volunteer and help them, with the people coming in, because they had opened up, and they wouldn't let us in. They said that there had been some people who had come the night before and were not doing good things.
Oh.
So I don't know. They didn't explain it.
So
I don't know whether they were hurting people or robbing people or being mean or belligerent. They didn't explain it, but it sounds like, there were some people taking advantage of other people.
So did you didn't get to volunteer, but did you see a lot of people there? Were a lot of people going to Joel Osteen's church?
They came, I think, during the night. We could not see because we were just at the front doors, and we couldn't see in.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people they turned away. A lot of us were turned away. Yes, they asked us to register online, and we had and then we had the darndest time finding out how to register online. Oh. We went to their website, and it was something else, but it took me quite a while to figure out how to register. Then when I registered, they had it set up so that you would work so many hours, like from I think from 2 to it was like 4 or 5 hours at a time.
So you're going back there sometime? You're going to go do it again?
Well, then they had it set up so you could tell what time you wanted to go, and every time that I was available to go, it was already filled.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so I haven't been able to volunteer over there.
All right, so let's just go over this situation. You are safe. Tell me, and you've lived in Houston all your life?
I have. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen anything?
Native Houstonian. I grew up over in the Heights.
Right.
That's the north side of Houston.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never. I also had friends that had problems during Allison, and I went over to help them in their homes. I have 2 friends, and they were close to Brays Bayou. And I used to live close to Brays Bayou, but we lived on the north side of Brays, and we never had problems. But I understand this year they did. But I have friends that live there in Brays Heights. Yeah. And when I went to help my friend, you could tell how high the water was because he had one of those crisscross shredders, and all little pieces of paper were at about 4 feet up from the floor. Yeah. So that's how you knew how high the water went. Yeah. But this is nothing compared to that because people have.
See, now I spent some time in Houston in the 70s. That's how I know a little about the area. I lived in the Montrose area, which I understand didn't get hit that hard.
Right. Most of us inside the loop did pretty good.
Yeah, and so as they were going out, and back when I was living there, Dairy Ashford was far out. Yeah. And now
it's not all that far.
Yeah, and I remember going onto the top of the Shell building and looking out, and I couldn't even imagine there being an outer loop or, a Beltway 8 or anything like that.
Right.
And so now, and I can't imagine, I imagine floods and rains because back in the 70s, I was dumb and drove into some still water and my car broke, and so I know the pain, but I can't imagine the entire city, and it's a large, by square mile, Houston is a huge city. It's like either 1 or 2 in the nation. And
we're the 4th largest.
In terms of population. But in
population,
But in terms of square miles.
Oh, yeah, we're one of I think we're behind Los Angeles, if I'm not wrong.
I think maybe one of the Florida cities has more, because they just keep adding on. But I just can't imagine how the city is. And, those of us who are outside of Houston, we see the news reports and we see the city underwater. And you know as well as I that the city is not exactly a walkable city. It's really all driving.
Right.
So if you can't drive, you're really stuck. And are people still stuck today?
I think. Well, I can see the Southwest Freeway from my living room, from my house, or my home, and there's cars on it now. For several days, there was only one or two cars, but it's not normal usage right now. Right. And there were parts of the Southwest Freeway or 59 south that were problems. I know when you'd get off the Southwest Freeway coming into town and to Wesleyan, which is where I live, my friend who went out the first night said that you couldn't take that exit off. So that always has a tendency to be low, and so does Kirby.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think most people inside the loop were fine, except that those over there by Stella Link and the Bayou, that's where the problems were.
How about, the Asian American community there? Chinatown, I understand, was pretty well saturated, and there was some flooding there.
I haven't heard of anyone having problems out there, but the Chinese Community Center, which is out in the Chinatown area, was one of the Red Cross shelter areas. So I'm sure that people went in there. I haven't seen any kind of information about that, but I know that a number of the churches, the Asian churches, opened up their doors for people.
Right.
And there's a number of Asian organizations that are going to donate money to those organizations that are helping, where Asians are.
Well, speaking of donations, one of the ways that we first met is when we talked about the Texas primary in the last election, and now we have a president, and he just an hour before this conversation we're having now, has said he would donate $1 million personally to the efforts. What do you think about the president's efforts so far? He hasn't visited any of the flood. Well, he went to Corpus and he went to Austin, but he didn't go into Houston. What do you think?
Coming this weekend.
Yeah. What do you think about what he's doing and how he's doing?
Well, I'm a Republican, and I supported Trump, not at the beginning, but I think he's done a good job. I think, he's encouraged us. I think he made us feel good about his coming. I think his donation of $1 million is good. It's his personal money, and I think that's good. We've had corporations that are donating $1 million here, so for him to do it personally, I think is a great move. I think Mr. Trump doesn't show emotion the way that George Bush did. I think he's a businessman that really kind of is stoic at times, and I think he's learned to do that as he negotiates and things like that. So you really can't tell what his feelings are.
Yeah, but
how I perceive him.
Do you think it hurts him though? As a nation, and especially those in Texas and in Houston, look for a comforter-in-chief?
I think he comforted us.
Yeah?
He did. I think he did. I think most people think he did comfort us by coming, by telling us he was going to stay behind us, by issuing the proclamation so quick, by sending so many different groups down here to help us, by sending the Navy ships down here to help with the water and that kind of thing. I mean, actions to me speak louder than saying I love you or crying or something like that. I think his actions and the use of government people and FEMA, I have friends that have already registered with FEMA.
Really?
Leah has already, and they've already called her. So, I mean, that's quick. That is quick.
Yeah.
And, she hadn't even gotten back into her house, but she went ahead and registered, and they've already called her. So she's into the system. I have another friend that's over in the Meyerland area, and I sent her site where she could register. She's registered and she's already heard from him. So to me, the action of taking care of people is what I think is important at this point.
Yeah. I guess there are still some people who might say, oh, well, he was so focused on getting a rally and, and the people who came out to see him, and he seemed detached. But you think that's just his way, his manner, his stoicism, as you put it?
I think it's the business acumen that he has that is that way. I think he was surprised that many people in Austin, Texas, the Democrat city, had people out there to cheer him on. I was kind of surprised because that's a very Democrat area, and I was surprised that people would go out to see him.
Yeah.
But I think his waving the Texas flag made us all feel good. Yeah. We love that flag.
Yeah. What do you?
We love that flag.
Well,
I can't tell you how much. If you drive around Houston and you see the American flag, you see the Texas flag with it.
Well, you remember, I lived in Texas for about 4 years, and both in Dallas and Houston, and I know how proud Texans are. Believe me, I know
right.
how proud. The Battleship Liberty over there in Houston. I mean, look, I know how proud they are. But how about your Senator Ted Cruz, who, wasn't exactly the most magnanimous when it came to Superstorm Sandy and funding for that. And now it looks like he's out there waving the flag, and it looks like he's a big government conservative. Is post Sandy? Is post-Sandy politics going to change some of these small government conservatives?
Well, he wasn't the only Texan that did not vote. There were two Sandy bills. The first one everyone voted for. The second one was loaded with unnecessary things and things that were, what do they call that?
Pork?
Where they load up. Yes, a lot of pork, and that's why they didn't vote for it. And I'm glad they didn't vote for it. I hate to see pork in bills.
But do you see?
I don't think that's the right. I don't think it's right to take advantage of a crisis and to try to get more money for your place while money should be going to help the people.
Well,
and to me, that's wrong.
I guess my point is are we going to see a change post-Sandy in the kind of, small government conservative thinking that maybe they will understand that there are people who need help and who need the government's help. And there's times when you can't just rely on businesses and donations and volunteerism, which is something that we're seeing more of now. And we even saw it when George Bush, right? When both the Bushes were out there, they encouraged volunteerism, but clearly that's not enough. You need
right. I think we all realize that. I think they all are going to have government help these people through FEMA. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to ask for the money, and I think they're going to ask for it in stages, which I think is good. I don't think it ought to be a huge amount of money at one time. We need to get over the first stage and see how it's doing and making sure the money's used right. And then if there's more need, then you do the second stage. But I don't. That's how I feel like it should be done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're talking about.
Now,
so, that may come back to bite some of our Texas senators or congressmen in the rear end. But, when there's pork in the thing, I agree with them 100%. Yeah. I wouldn't want them to vote for something where there's a lot of pork in there.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of Ted Cruz detractors who are commenting on his kind of about face, but let's see what happens. I mean, I'm glad you see that FEMA is coming through, and maybe Trump's actions will turn into something. But the very next day after he visited, or actually on the same, on Wednesday, he he divulged part of his tax reform plan and is calling for massive cuts in FEMA. It's calling for a lot of cuts on things that would help disaster relief and that would go into things like climate change and the effects of climate change. Do you think that the tax reform bill is going to have to go through some changes given Harvey, given the after effects of Harvey?
I think that, there's going to always be emergency monies available rather than having a lot of money in FEMA and then it not being used. So I think the emergency bills are the way to do it. It's just like our rainy day fund that we have in Texas, and I think that's what the federal government should have is a rainy day fund. So when we do have catastrophes, then that money can be used rather than giving a lot of money. Have you ever worked for government?
Oh yeah, I have. I worked in Congress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know how they want to, you know how people try to use up their budget at the last minute?
Right.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Well,
they really don't need that money. And so why give them so much money that they don't use and they're just buying frivolous things that aren't needed? I've worked in government, and I've seen people do that.
Well,
and then I've seen other people also turn in their money that they didn't use, which I think is the thing to do.
Yeah, I believe in a rainy day fund, but this is a once in 1,000-year rainy day fund, right? So
I agree with you.
It's pretty harrowing, I know, for many people. They say that one of the things about the storm is that it. You see these positive things, these, people opening up their hearts, strangers helping strangers, that kind of thing. Although I know when you said you went to Lakewood, they said that there were some people not doing some nice things. And, in life, right, if this were a normal day in Houston, you would see crime, you would see,
Sure.
the whole full spectrum, from petty crime to murder, right? And
right.
And I don't think it's really, you can really say, well, with all the rain, there wasn't any crime, or with Harvey there, crime or all the bad things were suspended and it was nothing but good. Who knows what we're going to see once the water is drained? And I don't know. It's sort of how does this all make you feel about your city? I mean, are people opening up, and is it making people feel united? What do you think?
I think people are willing to work to help people who are in need, and I don't think it matters who you are or what your need is. That we're willing to help you. And there's so many people that are willing to do that. And I think it's when they see the devastation and what's happened to people, they always think, oh, that could have been me. And so what can I do to help them? And so I think that's the way that people are. When people get back in Washington, no telling what's going to happen. It's one thing for them to be nice to you. I think that on the whole, people are really nice to each other. But when it comes down to doing some votes, I think there are people who are forced to toe the party line on both sides. And they get up there and they say things because they're required to say things. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Well, I just think that it's nice to think that there are people who, not just the politicians, but regular folks who are helping each other and volunteering. But we are seeing reports of gouging for gas, gouging for water, and we see people taking advantage of others. And after all, to go back into just to take a slight step toward the political realm, that's kind of what the politicians who want to cut government, what is the option after that? It's to go to the churches, go to private enterprise, and to go to the free market, to let the free market take care of these people. And that doesn't mean price gouging, but that's what happens when the free market feels free. And I don't know if you can, I hope that, there's this balance that can be found, but in lieu of that, I think we need more government funding, more government support for the people who need help because, well...
I think it'll be there. I think it'll be there.
I do. You're in a fortunate...
They're gonna have a special bill that will take care of the problems, is how I see it, is what I understand. They'll have a special appropriations for the needs right away. Well, that's how I see it.
But you know what's going to happen ultimately. It's going to be the market forces, the builders, the contractors. When I lived there in the 70s, there was a big boom for housing. And you know it on the west side, all those apartment complexes that just went up like that. And they're instant neighborhoods out there by Gessner and, off of Westheimer, way back on the west side of town. And, well, actually all over the town when they needed housing for the single people who were coming into the city. And that was back in the 70s, right? And they just popped up all in. There was a building boom all over Houston. And now we're a generation or two away. I don't even know if some of those apartment complexes are still up, but this is almost like a recycling of that. I see if things work out, we're going to see a building boom in Houston. If they can fix and assure people that these water issues can be fixed, because the water issues, they've been around with Houston from day one, right? I mean,
well, part of our problem with that is, I think, is there's too much cement laid everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you think about the medical center, I don't think. Have you been back to Houston?
I know where the medical center is. Yeah.
Okay. It's one building, one high-rise building right after another, and you know how deep they have to go and pour the cement for that. Yeah. And I think all of that right there. There's no place for the water to be absorbed because there's so much cement. In the medical center.
Well, people talk about they talk about I've heard about the cement issue and how there's nothing. You get the trillions of gallons of water dumped. On Houston. I mean, when I talked to someone on Sunday, they were talking about billions, right? And I had a hard time imagining. And since Sunday, now there are trillions of gallons of water, which is even harder to imagine. But
They've done some things in certain parts of town where we've had big drainage problems, and it's solved it when it's a normal rainfall. But even now, it hasn't worked. But they're putting big tanks under certain parts of the freeway, so that is where the water goes, and it's in storage, kind of like a drainage pool, and it's there, and that more of that needs to be done. But we need to have more permeable surfaces for the parking lots and all of that. That's going to. We need to think about that as we rebuild.
Now, Martha, you were on the city council, right?
And I tried to get a law that said that if you're going to build a shopping center with so much square foot, that you had to have so much permeable cement, so much permeable area for your parking lot. Well, the builders didn't like that. I never got it. I never got anywhere with that. And I was with Lanier, who is also, a builder. So, but that's the kind of thing that we really need to start thinking about.
Well, what years were you there at
I was there from, let's see, I can't even remember, from 93 to 99.
Oh, you're well past. I was there when Hofheinz was the mayor, so.
Oh, okay. You were there before. Yeah.
That's how far back I went. But
with Fred or Roy?
Fred.
Okay. Yeah.
I remember Roy when I was a little boy, but.
Okay.
So,
all right.
But I have a soft spot in my heart for Houston. I don't know what I can do about it except maybe visit it more and dump some hotel tax money for you.
Well, they're not charging hotel tax right now. You ought to come now.
All right, Martha.
But we've had another surge of apartments and high-rise condominiums lately, mainly because of all the people moving into Houston now.
Yeah.
So we'll have a lot of space for people to live in, but it probably won't be enough.
Yeah. Well, it's all, and it's different space though, because it was kind of in the 70s. It was kind of like all the young people in there, these these complexes, the mega one-bedroom apartment complexes are so.
Well, that's what they're doing now in the Montrose area.
Oh, well, that's where I used to live, the Montrose.
I know. Well, you ought to come back and see how it's changed.
Well, I mean,
that's where the young people are living now.
Is it? Oh.
And they build many, many complexes there.
Wow.
Apartment complexes.
Well, I know I wouldn't recognize it. I'd like to see I'd like to see it when it's dry, though. So.
Well, that part is dry now.
Well, Martha, I'm glad I can get a laugh out of you during these times when it's just so, you watch the news, you see rescue. Now they're just concentrating on these single rescues, and it's so sad and it's painful. And I'm glad that people are coming together. I hope you're right, and we do find a kind of post-Harvey type of politics where
I do too.
Where Ted Cruz is a little nicer, and maybe those who don't think Donald Trump is as nice can be a little nicer and show a little bit more. But you're more hopeful than I think.
Well, to me, you can either be sad or you can be happy, and I choose to be happy.
Can Houston, look, you've been through a lot there. You didn't get hurt this time, but can Houston come back, pull through?
Oh yeah, it'll come back. Don't worry, it'll come back. I think so. It'll be fine.
Okay.
It'll take us a long time though, because there are a lot of homes that were really destroyed.
Yeah. All right. Well, Martha, thank you very much for your time. Good luck to you.
Okay.
Best always.
Well, you're welcome. And there are many places that are good, but there are many places that are bad. And I think we're just thankful that we haven't lost so many lives as, a devastating thing like this where many lives could be lost.
It's just, and
I'm sure we haven't found them all yet.
Yeah.
But it's pretty remarkable, the number that have died from this. That it's not a huge number. It's not into the hundreds.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's what is it? It's like I think back to that time when I drove into standing water and my car got flooded, and I know the very first death that was reported last weekend, that it was a woman who drove into standing water, found herself, in submerged water, and then just couldn't get out, and it's just. It really saddens me.
It's scary. It's scary as heck.
Yeah. All right.
Well, a lot of people should have just stayed in. That's what they were told to do. But I know a lot of people had to get out also. But we'll survive, and we'll rebuild, and Houston will be great, and you can come back.
Okay. Martha.
Okay.
Martha, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Martha Wong on Harvey and post-Harvey politics. She's a Trump supporter, and hopefully she's right that the money will be there for the Harvey victims. She is unabashedly a supporter of Houston and their spirit, and let's hope they do come back. Houston's a great city. I used to live there, and, my heart goes out to all my friends who are still there, and my new friends who I've encountered. As I've, talked about Harvey, let's hope they get back to normal soon. And so on this day of prayer, we pray for the Harvey victims, but we also pray for the recipients of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Donald Trump said that he is going to make a decision by Tuesday, but no doubt probably something's going to be leaked out soon. We know that Congress is looking for legislative solutions, and let's hope that Donald Trump doesn't pull the plug on DACA. it would hurt his credibility if he goes into Texas and, doles out compassion, albeit somewhat late, for the victims of Harvey and those in both Texas and Louisiana. And then what if he comes back on Tuesday and says, no to DACA recipients? If he shuts the door and says, hey, you guys are out of here. I don't think it's a good look. Let's hope that the legislative solutions come to pass. We know that House Speaker Paul Ryan has indicated that he'd like to see the DACA recipients stay. And we know that Trump can't afford to alienate Congress anymore. So maybe we've got something good coming up for the DACA recipients. Let's hope so. Let's pray for them on the National Day of Prayer as well. And that's our program. Hey, we're on iTunes. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Tell your friends about the show. Share a link. You can contact me on Twitter at Emil Amok, or go to the ALDEF blog. That's at www.aaldef.org/blog. Give us your feedback there, or you can go to my personal site at www.amok.com. Hey, there at amok.com, you can leave a message on SpeakPipe. You don't need a phone, just punch the button, leave your message if you're so moved. Hey, we can also put it on the air if you say something cogent. You can also check out the blog and support the program. Go to aaldef.org/blog and click on the donate button. ALDEF is a 501c3, and your help is fully tax deductible. Just let them know you like the podcast and the blog. And that's it. And once again, thanks for listening to Emil Amok's Takeout. I'm Emil Guillermo.